Hey guys, it's Sai and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation, where you can find podcasts, interviews and content on a variety of subjects, including football, mental health, films, TV, conspiracy theories, wrestling, music and pretty much anything else you can think of. Today's guest is an award-winning author, podcaster and pro wrestling journalist. You may have seen her on Fightful's women's wrestling podcast, The Division. I'm very happy to welcome Laura Mauro to the show. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, cheers. So, before we inevitably talk some pro wrestling, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of other things, which I discovered yesterday when I clicked on your Twitter bio and then your website. You're not just a sort of podcaster and wrestling sort of journalist, writer. You're also award-winning author away from wrestling, which I have to say, when I read, I just thought that was really bloody cool. And I had a little nose on your website as well, and I was gutted because if I'd known, if I'd clicked like a week ago, I would have sort of checked out some of your stuff a bit. I would have had a look at it rather than just having a nose at the website. So, have you always been into sort of writing from a young age, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, to be honest, as soon as I was old enough to kind of hold a pen, I've been writing from a very young age. I started off writing poetry when I was about 6 or 7, and then sort of like teenage angst poetry, epic fantasy novels that were thinly veiled rip-offs of Final Fantasy games. So I've always written, but I didn't really start taking writing seriously until about 2012, which is when I started writing short fiction. And a very kind individual who saw me posting fiction on my blog and said, "Why are you posting it on your blog? Why aren't you submitting this for publication?" So it all kind of started there. Never really thought that I would be capable of being published. So, I guess I was wrong.
It's really cool, isn't it? Just like that, you were obviously, as many people do now, with the sort of blogs and websites and WordPress and things like that. People, they can, whether it's the writing like stories or novels or stuff like that, or they're just writing about their daily life or certain things or things they're passionate about. But it's really cool that someone came across it and was like, "No, you've got some talent. See if you can get them published." So, what was the first sort of novel or story you had published?
So I've had, I think about 18 short stories published and 1 novella so far. The first thing I ever got published was a story called Red Rabbit, and that was in 2012. And that was a story about 3 sort of loners on a road trip in America. And at that time, I didn't really know what kind of fiction I wanted to write. I wasn't really sure about genre or anything like that. I just wrote what was in my head, and what was in my head was weird. And, trying to find a place for that was I had no idea at that time. This is the thing, I was so naive about how publishing worked and how you got your stories out there. I just I knew that it happened, but so I was really lucky to find a small press, a Canadian small press called Undertow Publications, who put out a publication called Shadows and Tall Trees, and Undertow Press are actually the same publishers who are publishing my short story collection, my first ever short story collection, in July. So it's kind of come full circle, which is a really nice symmetry.
So is that short story collection? Is that the one I noticed at the top of your website? It mentions you were going to be involved with like Alice in Wonderland with a twist. Is that short stories? Because
no, so that's an anthology that I'm part of. So I'm really lucky that so once you kind of start getting your name out there, if you're lucky, you get invitations to projects, which is really exciting. And that was one of the projects that I've been invited to. Is from Maria Reagan, who's publishing at Titan, and she's basically put together an anthology of stories that are kind of a riff on Alice in Wonderland. So I've kind of gone with Alice in Wonderland but transported it to Osaka in Japan. Japanese yokai, which is folkloric monsters and stuff like that, which is one of my favorite subjects. So I just kind of got to go a little bit crazy with that one, but that's actually not in the collection. That's something that kind of came afterwards. That's coming out in, I think, October time, but there's going to be some good stories in that, I think.
Yeah, see, Alice in Wonderland, it's a weird. When I was a kid, I was scared of it when I was a small kid. Like I
I can understand that.
twisted. It's quite twisted.
Yeah. It's
But
really dark, yeah.
as I've sort of grown up and got older and had kids myself, I really enjoy it, and it's one of my favourite books which I've read to my kids over the years, because I could just appreciate all the little nuances that adults can take from the story, and it's really weird how it went for me from like being this twisted, scary thing, and now any opportunity I get, I'll read it to my kids. They're getting a bit old now. The youngest one is just about still wants me to read a story to him. The other two have that ship sailed, unfortunately.
Oh, I don't think I ever quite grew out of being read stories by my parents. I'll still listen to people read stories to me now. I love it.
Yeah, it's like it is one of my favourite. I got 3 boys, and obviously that can make for quite a noisy house. And
Yeah.
my eldest has got ADHD as well, so it can be quite chaotic sometimes. But it's just nice to chill out at the end of the day and like read a story, especially like with the younger one. He's 10, and we're at the moment we're reading Horrorland, like the Goosebumps sort of spin-off.
Oh, I loved
It's really
Goosebumps when I
cool
was young. I didn't realise
because
they were still making that kind of thing.
yeah, well, this is it. See, so it all started about probably about a year ago. We went to like the school fete or whatever, and there was some Goosebumps books, just the normal Goosebumps books,
Yeah.
and we sort of got them out to read them. I used to remember these when I was younger, and then they enjoyed them, and then I sort of had a look online, and they've like brought out all these like twisted spin-offs, and
That's
this
so cool.
Horrorland spin-off is so cool because what it is each story, it's like 20 books in the series, and each story introduces you to like these kids, and then at the end of that story you get like a chapter from an overarching story which is part of the 20 books, and those kids join up with the next book. So then in the next book you get like new characters, and then at the end of that book you have like a few chapters where those characters meet the characters from the first book, and
That's
it like goes
really
on
cool.
all the way through.
I love that because it's not just So I think one thing I really like is that you read your kids stories, because for me when I was young, being read to and being encouraged to read was so important, and it was like the gateway to me becoming a reader and a writer as an adult. But I also love that so when I was young, we had Goosebumps obviously, and then you kind of graduated to point horror when you were a teenager. But there wasn't as much fiction, for what they call YA fiction, I guess now, but there wasn't as much kids fiction that kind of took you seriously and didn't patronize you. And I really like that sounds like a really quite sophisticated series of books, actually. Like respecting kids' intelligence. It sounds amazing. I might have to check it out myself, actually.
It's really cool. Like sometimes it'll be like, it was the other night, it was like a bit later and perhaps I shouldn't have read, sort of thing. And I was like, oh, should we read a chapter? Because I was, I'd been reading it, and we're on, I think we're on like book 14 or something like that. So we're like right into the main part of the story. And but like what I like about it is you can read the book on its own as like a standalone thing, but also it's got like this big overarching story. And obviously, because it's Goosebumps anyway, it's really creative and funny, and some bits are scary for the kids and stuff. But I think it encourages them not just to read and to listen to stories, but also it encourages like creativity and that sort of the reward for reading all the books, that you get payoffs from the first book in like book 10 and things
I
like that.
love that. That's
And
brilliant.
like when we talk wrestling, and that'll be one of my gripes, no doubt, is that the lost art of overarching storytelling and being rewarded for like long-term investment.
Yeah,
It's like a
what
real
is
big thing for me.
continuity now? Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I totally agree.
it's like, but I won't go off onto that tangent
Not
just
yet,
yet.
anyway.
Um, so like going back to you, what's the, like, out of all the stuff you've written, what's your favourite story or novella?
Oh, that's hard. It's like picking one of your favourite children. I guess so Looking for Laika is actually the first ever science fiction story that I wrote, and it was about. So I have weird obsessions, and that's one of the things that kind of fuels me as a writer. Is these I go down rabbit holes of subjects that are really interesting to me. So like when I wrote the story Sundogs, it was because I just learnt about preppers and people who live off grid in America in the Mojave Desert, and I just thought that was so strange and interesting. But Looking for Laika is like a long term obsession I've had with the Russian space dog Laika. She was a dog that was sent up into space in, I think, 1950s, and I've always wanted to write a story about her. And it's kind of a story about stories, and it was. I'd been kind of creatively a bit bereft for a while because I hadn't written anything for me for a long time. So when I sat down and wrote that story, it was because I wanted to write that. That was a story that I needed to write. And that story actually, it won the British Fantasy Award last year for Best Short Story, which was a real shock in a good way. But I'm really glad it was that story, because that story, it had lots of elements of me in it. It was set in a caravan park in a very thinly veiled Selsey Bill on the south coast, which I spent an awful lot of time as a kid in a caravan there with grand. So I know it's a cliche, but I think authors, we always put a little bit of ourselves in the story, but that story had a lot of me in it.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's only natural when you're writing or creating anything, whether it's video or radio or music, you're always going to tend to use your own life experiences and things, pleasant memories, or if you're making something scary or bad, you're going to feed off negative memories. So I think it's only natural, and I think that all like the best sort of creators, whether they be writers or filmmakers, they've all got a bit of themselves within the way they tell their stories. So I think that's an absolutely a good thing, no doubt. So let's get down to the glory. So you won the award.
I did, yeah.
So you'll have to excuse my ignorance in terms of, is that like was it like a glitzy sort of awards ceremony where you had like a list of nominees and it was announced, or was it more?
Well, I would say glitzy is the right word for it, but it was so every year in the UK there's a genre writers convention called FantasyCon, which is run by the British Fantasy Society, and they have the British Fantasy Awards. At the end of the convention, they have this award ceremony, and it took place in a hotel. So the whole convention is in a hotel, and they have panels and discussions and readings, and it's a really great event. So it was a large room full of people sitting at tables, and it was actually terrifying, because even though I genuinely didn't think I stood a chance of winning, it's still something about having your name read out. I hadn't prepared a speech. I didn't expect to win, and there I've got to stand up in front of all these people and kind of try and form coherent sentences when my brain is just making, my brain had checked out at that point. I actually genuinely don't remember, which is a little bit worrying, but people assure me that I didn't say anything rude. So, it was unreal. It really was an unreal experience.
I think it's hard enough speaking in front of, like, doing a speech. Like, I know from just doing my brother's best man speech, it was horrifyingly bad.
Oh yeah.
In terms of like I built it up so much, and it was just, it's like you just got this dread coming into it. So I mean, in some ways, because you didn't expect it, you haven't got that build up of pressure.
Oh sure,
in terms of the speech and stuff. But the only problem is you haven't got anything prepared to say for your speech. But I mean, quite often, I think, if you can speak from like your heart and how you feel, it comes out just as well as it would if you'd, prepared.
I think better in a way, because I say I don't really remember what I said, but quite a few people afterwards come up to me and said that it was very heartfelt and very genuine, and which is nice, because I haven't had a clue what I said. I know I shouted at someone at some point to stand up because I wanted to thank them, but I got a bit overexcited. But I'm not actually that afraid of public speaking if I'm well prepared. But in a situation like that, when it's very personal and it's very emotional, I'm not so good at that. You know, if I'm kind of like, if I've got my lines and I've got my game face on, I'm good. I'm all right,
Yeah.
you know. But when you have to actually be a human being, like I always joke that I'm not very good at putting on my people suit. You know, if I've had time to put my people suit on and I can be a person, like I prepared for it, excuse me, then I'm good. I can go. If I have to kind of, you know, go up without having prepared my people suit in advance, that's when I get a little bit, you know, oh no, I have to pretend to be a person now. It's I'm not so good at that.
And I think as well, from like a positive point of view as well, is I think for everyone, if you're preparing what you're going to say beforehand, it's easy to lose a bit of that emotion and that sort of not the passion, but it's obviously much more heartfelt if you speak just off the cuff, because it's just raw emotion and excitement. And like you say, you just like shouted at someone to stand up. And perhaps if you'd prepared a speech, you'd have been a bit more calmer, and you'd have perhaps not had that emotion. And I think it adds to the moment.
I think so. I hope so. Anyway.
But it was your moment, so I suppose
Yeah.
it's, you know, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Like in school, like I always loved to write, and I was really good at English in school. And I always thought I'd like to do something with writing or journalism or creative writing, something like that. And then sort of stuff happened and things went on, and I never really pursued it. And then now that I've sort of started doing this podcast stuff, it's like lit a bit of sort of creativity in me a bit, and I'm contemplating like just writing like a blog or something to accompany some of their shows, particularly the ones which are like the mental health ones, where like I spoke to a doctor earlier about ADHD and stuff like that, and I did one on depression and grief. I think like writing to go with it could help.
Oh, definitely. I
Well,
mean,
help me, if nothing, you know, even if no one else like reads it or gets anything from it, I think it would help me.
Oh, 100%. And I think honestly, these things. So, how many years ago was it now? Probably about 5 years. OCD, and because it wasn't the typical presentation of OCD, I, for a start, didn't think there was anything wrong with me. I thought I was just a bit weird. But when I searched the internet for people who'd had similar experiences, I felt so much. Normal is not the right word. I didn't feel normal, but I felt less alone, and I felt like I could cope with it because other people had coped with it. Excuse me. So then I write about it on my blog as well, and putting my thoughts on the page and writing it down. I think there is a power to that. I think in confronting your own feelings. Sorry, excuse me. I've still got a cough. Anyway, but what I mean to say is that I think, you know, you found your gateway drug into creativity, which is great, because I think everybody has a gateway drug into creativity, and it's just finding that thing that opens the door for you. So if podcasting leads to writing something else, that's wonderful, and it's obviously a natural process, and you absolutely go with it, I think. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Like, it's funny you mentioned some sort of poetry in your teens, and I've got a friend who will probably watch this at some point, who I used to write some really, really dodgy poetry to, and she said to me the other day, actually, or the other week, that she found some of them, and I was like, burn them all.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, but I was really into like the Doors, so like you can imagine.
Well, I was
Imagine
Nine
some
Inch
of the stuff
Nails,
I
so
was
you
writing.
can sort of see where, yeah. But you know, honestly, I think there is no wasted writing. There is no bad writing. I'm very passionate about this. All writing that you do is practice. You know, whether it's the bad poems that you wrote when you were a teenager and you were trying to be Trent Reznor or Jim Morrison or whatever, whether it's the fan fiction that you wrote, because I'm not too proud to admit that I wrote fan fiction. I still do write fan fiction. It's all practice. You don't get better at something unless you do it. And whatever form that takes. And I also think that it's this. You should keep this stuff, and it should be part of your history, because when you look back as a writer at the stuff that you used to do, and you compare it to the stuff that you do now, sometimes writing is a very lonely business, and sometimes writing is very it's very easy to get lost inside your own head. So to have that point of reference, of comparison to where you were, where you are now, and you can kind of get an idea of where you will be in 5 years' time. It's such a useful tool to have. And it's, like I said, it's part of you. It might not be your finest hour, but it's still part of you, and it's still part of your history, and it still matters, I think.
Yeah, I can certainly see that you, but I'd prefer that it never sees the light of day.
Well, that's fine.
But...
you can always put it in a box under the bed somewhere, in another box, in a box.
Yeah.
So which says
With
"Do
a
not
lock.
ever read." Yeah, that's fine. that's allowed.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, I'm glad now that I came across your website and stuff yesterday, because like I said, like creative writing and stuff like that was something that I was really passionate about when I was a lot younger and in my teens. So I'm really pleased that I got to just have a quick chat with you. I'm a bit disappointed that I couldn't have looked into like some of the stuff you'd done, a bit more, so it could have gone into a bit more depth, but maybe another time for that. But I'm definitely going to be looking out for those Alice in stories, though, because
I think there's going to be some really good stories in that. I've had a sneak peek of some of the other stories in it from some of the other authors, and I think there's some really interesting takes on it. I'm really excited as a reader to read it. So
it's really it's a story that's had loads of different takes on it over the years. And funny enough, a couple of years ago, my wife had a book. I don't know if we've still got it, but it was like twisted fairy tales. So it was all the various fairy tales, all the fairy tales you could think of, but they were like all twisted. They were really like macabre, and the characters would change slightly, and maybe someone who was good was bad. I forget what it was called, but I thought that was such a cool concept. I think
I love stuff
at
like
the
that.
time it was just a little bit. I think it was my youngest son didn't quite get it. He was a bit like, well, why isn't so and so, why isn't, I know, Snow White still with the 6 dwarfs and 7 dwarfs and whatever, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But the middle one, he loved it. He was really into it.
Brilliant.
So that just reminded me of it. But yeah, this sounds like you like that sort of like fantasy, sort of twisted, different version. It's just a different take on traditional things. I quite like a different point of view of things.
I don't know.
Not everything has to stay the same and be rebooted the same.
Yeah,
it can be changed.
Change it up. There's so many things you can do with things. You don't have to. I'm kind of like a big believer that what we call canon, is a very flexible thing, and you don't have to be a slave to canon. And I don't know if you're familiar with the game. There's a video game called American McGee's Alice, which I played a long time ago. It's very old now, and that's a dark take on Alice in Wonderland. And that was probably the first time I'd come across the idea of taking fairy tales or popular stories and kind of putting a spin on them. And then from there, I got into Angela Carter, who's her anthology, The Bloody Chamber, is really like a really famous reworking of fairy tales and stuff like that. So it's something that's been done a lot, but there's so many different ways you can do it. There's so many different ways to transport a story into the modern era. Like I think one of these stories in the Alice anthology is a kind of a cyberpunk Alice in Wonderland, which is a really cool idea. And there's also an author called Georgina Bruce who's written a kind of an Alice themed set in like a MMORPG kind of world, a video game world. So there's just so much you can do with these ideas. No, I agree with you. Why reboot when you could just remix?
Indeed. And like the thing is now is when you compare the times, like modern times, to even when I was little, 37 years ago I was born. So like when I was a small child, those times compared to now, you've got so much more things to draw from.
Yeah.
And because the world has changed so much, people's imagination and creativity has changed to a completely different level.
Yeah.
So why not embrace it?
Definitely, we have so many, and I think one of the cool things as well about the way the world is now is because we're much more global. There's kind of like takes on stories from across the world now, which is really interesting to me as well. So, it's not just perspectives from our own cultures, but perspective from other cultures and other places. We didn't have that so much when I was young, and now I find it fascinating. You know, I'm really interested in things like Japanese culture, but also Finnish culture. There's, you know, quite a lot of cultures that I find really, really interesting that you have access to now. That maybe, and I guess that, you know, because you know, we're all connected now, aren't we? The internet is kind of the world in one place, which is, you know, has its pros and its cons, but one of the great things about it is you can hear, like, I didn't realize that Alice in Wonderland is massively popular in Japan. It's a really popular story, and there are lots of Japanese takes on it, you know, it by Japanese authors and Japanese creators. So it just kind of goes to show how, you know, how connected we all are and how connected our stories are.
Yeah, I mean, like you could post a take on or a story or something on your website tomorrow, and people, you know, in Australia, Japan, wherever, could read it within seconds. It's changed the way people can take in information. It can be done at the click of a button.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like you say, there's a lot of positives and, you know, there's some negatives to it. But I'm on board with you. Japan is on my bucket list of places to go.
Oh, definitely do it. I just sit here and enable you the whole time. It's it's one of the best places I've been to.
I think we'll say it quietly. I'm just waiting for my kids to grow up. But yeah, that's on my bucket list of places to go. Japan. Okay, so we'll move towards wrestling slowly.
In the general direction.
Yeah, just the general sort of direction.
Well,
so how did you get
too,
into,
right? So
yeah, well, that's it. And I've got like a big, and also not just the storytelling aspect, but also the retelling and evolving of what's traditional wrestling to what wrestling is today. And I'm a big fan of that you should change from a wrestling point of view. Wrestling should change. It should never stay the same for too long a period, because what worked 20 years ago didn't work 20 years before that, and vice versa. So how did you get into podcasting and writing about wrestling?
So I think it was last year, maybe. I haven't been doing it that long, actually. I think early last year sometime I made a slightly petulant tweet about about how I wish somebody would pay me to write about wrestling, because it's my two loves. You know, at that time I was a writer, but I was also a wrestling fan. You know, and I was like, wouldn't it be great if I could put my love of writing together with my love of wrestling? And a friend of mine was running a website called Pro Wrestling Journal, which does a lot of really cool stuff about UK indies, and I was invited to write for them. And then I was scouted by Daily DDT, which is really exciting. They asked me to come on board and write for them, and I've been with them ever since. And it's just making contacts. I met Kristen Ashley, who works for Fightful, and also Bell to Bells, which is a new women's wrestling website. She invited me to come and do some podcasting. Warren Hayes asked me to come on the show for NXT UK. So it's really, you know, just people have asked me to pop by, and apparently they don't hate my voice, so it's worked out all right. You know, I must be better at talking than I thought.
That's it, isn't it? That's a bonus, is if people can listen to you without switching off.
Hopefully.
And you know, it's funnily, when I did a show with Warren the other day, we were sort of talking. I was asking him about when he first started and stuff like that. And I said, so when I finally, like, I've been wanting to do like the podcasting thing for about 3 years, and I just, I've got some health problems and stuff, physical and sort of mental health as well. But like, I kind of used them as an excuse to not quite put myself out there and take a chance on it. You know, they were sort of reasons, but like equally, I was quite happy to sort of be just about to launch it, and then like, oh, I can't.
It's hard to get out of your comfort zone, isn't it?
Yeah, and then my biggest problem was I basically said, right, I'm going to do it. I set up a Twitter page, I set up a YouTube channel. I was like, I told people I'm doing it, and then I sort of, a week went by and I hadn't done anything, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do it again. So I thought, no, I'm going to record a video. I'm going to just sort of do like an introduction and just say, this is what the channel's going to be about. This is the sort of thing I'm looking for. Come say hi type thing.
Yeah.
And I recorded that video. It was only like probably a 3-minute, 4-minute video. I recorded it about, must have been over 20 times, and just delete, do it again, delete, do it again, because I did not like the sound of my voice on a recording. And that was a big sort of hurdle for me to get by, because I did record that video so many times, and I got to a point, I think after about 20, and I was like, look, I'm either going to have to just not do it. If I can't get past this, I can't do it, can I? I can't podcast without speaking. Or I just got to say, sod it.
Is that
this
how
is what it is?
Then you
this
just
is what
sort
I sound like with it. And I just recorded that next take, edited it, and put it out. And it had a pretty good feedback from, like, at that point, it was just friends and, you know, just people I know who were saying, good for you, that type of stuff. And then as I've sort of got people to come on, I've become more comfortable in myself then. So it's just like even though me and you have never spoken before, like the first show I did, I really was like, my anxiety was like right up through the roof, and I could, watching it back, like other people said, oh yeah, it was really good, and they enjoyed it. It was about ADHD. But like my wife said, and my kids said, so they could tell that I was like struggling a bit with it.
Yeah.
And I was like really anxious, and I was like reading off a script off the screen, but I've got used to it. And I think
you
it's
find
about
it easier now that you've done it more?
Yeah, I think this is about the 20th show I've done now, and it's just talking to people, and I think it helps that I'm in my own house, so I don't have to go out and speak to people at this point. I'm quite comfortable just to sit. So like, and it's really weird because I'm quite antisocial. Like I've got a really dry sense of humor, which sometimes comes across as being quite grumpy.
Yeah.
Particularly to people who don't know me. So like some of the people who do know me are a bit like, wow, you're like speaking to strangers and like sort of having a conversation with them and laughing and joking and back and forth. And they were like, you know, where's that been for the last 10 years?
Yeah.
So just don't know. It's just easy. But just a lot. One of the things I would try to stick to is I try to stick to what I know. So I'm talking about things that I'm either knowledgeable about or I'm passionate about. So then I'd never feel too uncomfortable in terms of, like, we're talking about writing and wrestling, or I'll talk to people about films and stuff like that. Did you find it difficult when you, like that first sort of podcast you did, did you find it a bit nerve-wracking, or did you feel relatively comfortable with it?
Oh no, it was terrifying, honestly, because I get imposter syndrome. So, you know, even though I've been watching wrestling since I was about 8, maybe, I was convinced that I didn't know anything about wrestling. So why on earth are people, you know, why are people getting me to talk about wrestling? I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know anything about wrestling. Of course I do. You know, I've been watching it most of my life. But all of a sudden, when it came to actually talking about it and actually recording myself talking about it, it was, I kind of felt like I have no right to talk about this. I'm not an expert. I don't know anything. So yeah, I was terrified, honestly. And you know, I'm the same with you. You know, the sound of my own voice is weird to me, you know, because I don't sound like the way that I think I'm supposed to sound like. So that was, it was something to get over, I think. And it really helped that Warren was, you know, as you know, you've spoken with Warren, that Warren is the chillest guy. You know, he's very relaxed. He's a very nice person, and he makes you feel comfortable. And that really helped. I think if it had been somebody maybe less friendly and less open than Warren, I might have struggled more. He made me feel at home, and also he never made me feel like I didn't know anything. You know, he kind of respected my opinions, and I thought, wow, maybe I actually do know what I'm talking about. But it was scary. Genuinely was frightening. Everything you're saying I relate to. It's putting yourself out there that first time is very alarming.
I think the one thing which helped me overall was that I did a couple of shows with Sean Rossap from Fightful, which were like Fightful Books it shows on the Patreon service. I think I did 3, which is just where we basically, you know, did some fantasy booking and stuff like that. But he's the same. He's very similar to Warren. He's just a very nice guy. We had a wild time. We'd never spoken in person before, but I've done sort of 3 hours now of just talking wrestling with him and laughing and joking, and it's a strange thing because, like you say, been watching wrestling. I've probably watched more wrestling than I've watched anything else.
Yeah.
You know, because there's so much of it.
There's so much of it.
It's just hours and hours of it. I find it difficult to keep up.
Totally.
So you said you started watching wrestling about age 8.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
what wrestling did you watch like when you were younger?
So in those early years, it was reruns of World of Sport. I don't know if you must remember. Do you remember Eurosport? It was on, I think, Channel 4 in the early morning. Yeah, and I'm sure they used to play World of Sport on there because I remember Sunday mornings watching it with my granddad. Like old school wrestling, you know, giant haystacks and Big Daddy and all that kind of stuff. And then as I got a little bit older, this is much later, WCW used to come on Channel 5 because I didn't have Sky. So I actually started off with WCW, not WWE. I was a WCW fan before WWF or WWF in those days. But then, you know, you make friends, people. My friend had Sky, watched WWF, and that was kind of the era of. It was not quite Attitude Era. It was Edge and Christian was still with Gangrel and the Brood, you know, that kind of era. And like larger than life characters, which, you know, for me at that age, you know, and I was going through a goth phase at that time as well. So of course I was like, yes, this is so cool. The Hardy Boys, I basically want to be the Hardy Boys when I grow up. But yeah, World of Sport was the gateway drug, and then WCW, and then WWF.
So you see, I'm just about old enough that I don't know if I remember it, or I remember watching World of Sport on ITV. On like a Saturday evening, and then I think, oh, I can't be that old. Surely that was way before my time. But then I think I probably am just about old enough.
In your defence, it wasn't that long ago.
Long enough.
I know how you feel.
Obviously, when it came back recently, that was like quite emotional at one point.
Yeah,
like, when
it was
I first found out, because it was like, wow, this is really good for wrestling.
And I bet it must have been quite exciting with your kids as well, kind of have that come full circle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And just like showing them that. And it's like, I used to watch this.
Yeah.
I was like tiny. And then it's come all the way back and it's back on. Obviously, the All Elite pay-per-view is on ITV as well.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that.
Can't believe it. I got to say, I thought it would be on somewhere in the UK. But I thought it was going to be somewhere random, like the Extreme Sports channel.
Yeah, like some Freeview channel or something.
One of the really obscure ones.
It's a big deal. I mean, I think I've talked to people in America, but it's ITV pay-per-view. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to understand, for ITV to even take that kind of punt on it, that's quite big. You know, ITV is a mainstream channel. And I know that it's a pay-per-view channel, but, you know, the fact they're touching it with a barge pole is, from my point of view, is remarkable. I'm really excited.
I was genuinely really shocked when I heard, and obviously the pre-show is on ITV4 from 12, which that in itself, you know, so like it's not like they've just sort of chucked it all on pay-per-view, and it's reasonably priced as well. It's like, I think it's 15 quid or 18 quid for the HD version. That's nothing in this day and age for a pay-per-view.
Absolutely. I mean, I would have gone for it anyway, but I think it's really important to support it. You know, I think we're in an era now where, I mean, can you imagine the dream would be you got World of Sport wrestling to represent British wrestling on ITV, but then you also had AEW. That made it, you could have like the British and American wrestling. That'd be on mainstream British TV. Oh, I'd be made up if that happened.
Oh, it'd be awesome, like just like a Thursday night or something.
Yeah,
like
how cool would that be?
All Elite wrestling, and like, I think it's important for the wrestling business as a whole, because I feel like the only way the WWE is going to make a change, and the only way WWE is going to perhaps address the elephant in the room that is Vince McMahon's a 74-year-old guy who's trying to cater his TV for people who are from a completely different generation to him.
Amen.
I think the only way that changes is if All Elite gets some momentum and get some decent TV and some decent TV ratings, and then suddenly they are under pressure. And like, obviously, I'm not saying that they're just magically going to be neck and neck with them. Like, WWE is a multi-billion-dollar brand which has been built over, 50, 60 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think it only takes 6 months to a year of good ratings and WWE's ratings to keep dropping.
Oh,
And then
definitely.
suddenly they're going to have to take notice, because all those wrestlers who are disgruntled, they've got somewhere to go where they can
Yeah.
earn the same money. And I think that's a big thing. Even though the brand won't be as big, the fact that they can get paid a similar wage, or in
Yeah.
some cases, I'm sure they'll get more. That's
You've got to give you guys a
change.
livable wage. Yeah, totally. It's excuse me. I think the wage is a big thing, but I think the other big thing, and I think Sean Ross Sapp mentioned this recently when he was talking about what WWE wrestlers are frustrated about is the lack of creative control. Well, not even creative control, but the lack of
Creativity. No.
like you were talking about earlier on about continuity, right? And I'm just going to drag it back in, but no, but you were right. The problem is, create this. It's creatively dead right now, WWE. The continuity is out the window, and all of a sudden you've got AEW. The thing is, remember, I don't know if you remember, but how good WWE was during the Monday night. AEW breathing down their neck. They had to produce, and they produced. Yeah, okay, there was some dodgy stuff back then too, but for the most part, they produced some really good, really innovative, really exciting wrestling. WCW were producing some really good stuff at the same time as well, and then everything just died away. You've had Ring of Honor are there, they exist, but then let's face it, they're not
struggling
really,
now, aren't they?
yeah, it's bad. And
That.
I mean, it's kind of their own fault they're struggling. I mean, there've been some diabolical booking in Ring of Honor. I don't know what kind of decisions they've been made. I'm still bitter about Dalton Castle's reign being, going nowhere. But that's just
that was.
And then you had Impact, which Impact kind of keeps coming up and going down, and coming up and going down. And Impact recently has just gone down the toilet as well, if you ask me. But so AEW coming along it's a game changer. It's so exciting, and I think it's good for WWE as well. I know a lot of people were talking about it in a sense that it will knock WWE down a few pegs, and that is true. But I think it will be healthy for WWE because, as you point out, and you're completely right, it's beholden to Vince McMahon. The whole company is Vince McMahon's whims and his desires, and they've really got to realise that they can't run the company on that model anymore. It doesn't work that way anymore. And I think if they've got competition that in the form of a company that are doing new things and exciting things and relevant things. I mean, Cody's the promo that he did recently was one of the most exciting things I've seen in wrestling lately. WWE haven't done anything to compare to that in a long time.
No, they have not. And I think one thing which I made me think when you were saying about WCW then is like in that era where they were both at the top of their game, you had two wrestling programs on mainstream American TV at the same time, both drawing 2 million plus or 3 million. I think it's probably more, three and a bit million each.
Yeah,
that's unheard of now. Like at the moment, I think WWE is happy if they hit over 2 million, but like they were on at exactly the same time, both on like good slots, both on good channels, both drawing in. So wrestling was hot.
Yeah.
And I think All In last year gave everyone a little sort of taste of what maybe could happen. And it might not pan out, but just that one show sort of gave everyone this like, oh, and New Japan was hot at the time. They have taken a bit of a hit, I think, since like Kenny Omega left and the Bucks and stuff are not, them not being on ROH and New Japan, I do think it's hurt them.
I think you're probably right about that.
In ROH's point, I do agree that some of their booking decisions has been horrifically bad. I really don't know what they're doing. New Japan, they still consistently put on amazing matches.
Yeah.
But I do feel like they've lost a little bit of steam. But then WWE at the moment, there's characters that I like, but they want me to commit 5 hours of TV, like on a Monday and a Tuesday, and I find it really difficult because not much of it compels me. Not much of it keeps me interested.
Yeah.
I'm like on my phone or I'm doing something else. And I have to say, the only thing at the moment, which I'll Raw and SmackDown, which I genuinely am looking forward to, where I can't wait till next Monday just to see is the Bray Wyatt stuff.
I love
I
it.
genuinely can't wait to see where that goes. But everything else, I'm a bit like, nah. And I shouldn't be, because like Seth Rollins versus AJ Styles has got the potential to be amazing.
Yeah.
Kofi Kingston versus Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens is one of my favorite characters of over like the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So it boggles my mind how badly they handle.
It really does.
Booking.
I mean, like, so I think a good example is, so one of my favourite wrestlers pretty much ever is Sami Zayn, believe it or not. I love Sami Zayn. So when he came back, I was so excited, you know, and they're giving him significant time on the mic. He's proven what a great promo he is. And they've wasted it.
Nowhere.
Well, he's cut the same promo 4 times in a row. It hasn't gone anywhere. He's been thrown in a dumpster by Braun Strowman, and then all of a sudden he's fine the next night. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about that. That match was great. You know what? The Kofi AJ Sami Zayn match, brilliant match. I'm really glad that happened. But the continuity went in the bin with Sami Zayn. You know.
Yeah, it's like that's one of the most frustrating things, isn't it? It's continuity and logic. It's almost sometimes you feel like it's insulting to your intelligence watching. They just want you to forget things which have happened the week before. And like when I watch TV, like for instance, one of my favorite TV shows of all time was Lost, because every week they gave you just a little smidgen of the overall story, but not too much.
Yeah.
So you wanted to watch the next episode, but you also were rewarded for keep coming back. And I know some people will say it went on too long and whatever, you know, but that's the general meaning of it is like same with Prison Break, Breaking Bad, all these shows which were, you know, huge successes. They reward the long-term viewers for sticking with them.
Absolutely.
By going back to things that happened in the first series, or you know, they don't just drop storylines and never answer the questions. Every question is answered. Every loose end is tied up.
Yeah.
So you're invested in those people, in the characters.
Definitely. There's a storytelling device that writers use called, I don't know if you know about it, it's called Chekhov's gun. And the principle is it comes from the playwright Chekhov. And the idea is that if a gun is put on the mantelpiece in the first act of a play, it should be fired or used in the fourth act of a play. So the idea is that you say that the observant person who notices the gun on the mantelpiece will be back when that gun is used, right? So exactly what you're saying. There's nothing is insignificant, nothing is unused. And you know, I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones, and you know, for all my complaints about that show, sometimes it is good at calling back to things that happened several seasons ago. You know,
I've never watched an episode, so I can't comment on that.
It's a big commitment. But you know, if you want a wrestling example of that, so I think the reason that I love Sami Zayn as much as I do, also Kevin Owens, you're completely right, is because the continuity that they personally have maintained throughout their career, from the days of Kevin Steen and El Generico to now, they, within their own kind of storytelling, there's so many little callbacks and so many little consistencies that they keep putting in that are so clever that it just draws me to them and their story. I don't know how much of it is kind of stuff that's written or how much of it is stuff they've kind of slipped in past the radar.
I think it's probably them, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like them, doesn't it? It's a kind of an organicness about it that I don't think you can write.
Then do you think that's why they're so good? Those two in particular is because everything they do seems so organic that you never quite know. Did they script him to do that or say that, or did he just add it because whether it's a mannerism or a little sentence or you know whatever it may be? I think they're the Kevin Owens in particular. I think he's a master at those little. Just Alex Pulowski on the Fightful show on Monday, actually Tuesday after SmackDown, said every time Kevin Owens does his power bomb on the apron, he has like a slightly different expression. Yeah. As if he's surprised that he's capable of it. And you know, I can't imagine that Vince McMahon's telling him to do that. Do you know what I mean? He's just, this is what you've got to do and go and do it type thing.
There's a person on Twitter called I can't remember what their Twitter handle is, but it's Myth Gifts, and they tell the story. I mean their gift threads are works of art, and they tell the story of Sammy and Kevin, or El Generico and Kevin, and when you sort of see the way that they cut it down, you realise how good both of these men are at telling stories, not just verbally but physically. You know, when you think Sami Zayn as El Generico was wrestling under a mask all that time, so he's had to tell stories through body language, and he still does. It's little things like he hits the blue thunder bomb, and every time he hits the blue thunder bomb, he really thinks he's going to get the pin this time, you know, and he never does. But the belief is always there, you know. The kind of the exhaustion and the despair, and when after a long match, I don't know, the both of them are masters at body language and telling stories. And I love that, because even if they don't have creative control over their script, and even if they don't have creative control over their stories, they are maintaining a degree of creative control over themselves, the way they tell their stories. And that is next level to me. That's kind of like, that's what elevates them as next level performers. You see it with Kenny Omega and Carter, and that's why they are next level performers, because the stories they tell with their bodies in the ring, and the stories they tell with their facial expression, all the non-verbals, are probably more important than the actual, you know, the story that is written, I think.
Yeah, I think as well, the only two other people sprung to mind when you were just saying that. I think Daniel Bryan is very similar.
Definitely.
But the one person who I felt on top of that, who not necessarily mannerisms or body language in the ring, although he was very good, but took responsibility for his character making sense and his character's reasoning behind what he's doing and why he's doing it, was CM Punk.
Yeah.
If he had a stupid script to read, he'd read the script, but he'd make sense of it from his character's point of view. And that's why he's one of my favorites, because, exactly what I was going to say. That is very difficult when you look back at some of the scripts that people have been given over the last sort of 5 to 10 years in the WWE. Some of them have been awful, like so bad.
Yeah, seriously.
So Bray Wyatt, let's go back to Bray Wyatt.
Let's go back to Bray Wyatt.
Firefly Funhouse.
Yeah.
Like I do find at the moment, it's like a necessity. I won't miss a second of it. Like it is that much watch for me at the moment.
Yeah.
Because it's got so much possibility, so many different ways they could take it, so many different ways. What does it mean?
It's that, isn't it?
This and this is that. But in the back of my mind, I'm still expecting them to drop it or to completely cock it up.
Oh, that will happen. That will happen. Remember the Fashion File? You know, Fashion Files was must-see TV for a while, and it just died a death for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, but, it's almost like Vince doesn't get it. That's it. Even if the fans are into it, which is another one of their problems, is they seem to want to fight the fans.
Yeah, I don't get that. It's Vince doesn't like it. Yeah, these are the people that are. These are your audience. Why would you not give your audience what they want? It's the most illogical thing. I know you're right about Firefly Funhouse. Bray Wyatt.
Where would you take it from? Where would you take it if you were booking Bray Wyatt from now? Where would you take that gimmick?
So I was blindsided by Ramblin' Rabbit. I didn't expect him to die off so quickly. They went full George R.R. Martin with that. That was great. I kind of love that Bray Wyatt was must-see TV for a while, and then he just kind of disappeared, didn't he? He was, wasn't really doing anything, and he just reinvented himself, or has been reinvented, I should say, into this kind of eerie. My favourite thing about Firefly Funhouse is the silent children. I love that. The children at the end of it that are just, it's brilliant. There's a lot of interesting rumours about Abby and who Abby might be, and if Abby is representing someone or represented by somebody. And the rumour that I've heard that I am quite intrigued by is that it could be Nikki Cross.
Yeah.
And I'd be down with that. I think I'd be down with Nikki Cross involved in Firefly Funhouse somehow. I think she'd fit.
Yeah. So I've got two theories. One of them is like based on discussion I had with Warren the other day. So my initial theory was that it's going to be obviously him. It's going to be Nikki Cross, and then it's going to be the Ramblin' Rabbit was going to be Eric Young, and the Buzzard was going to be Killian Dane,
Oh,
and it was going to be a new stable for him. However, Warren ruined that for me.
he does that.
Because he said he thinks that it's basically these characters are Bray's past personas, and it's portraying what's going on in his mind. So, like the Wayland Mercy, his original gimmick was very much influenced by that, and people said he was a rip-off of Wayland Mercy. Obviously, Abigail is the witch, blah blah blah. And then the Rambling Rabbit portrays the sort of gimmick he had just before he left, where people would starting to get a bit fed up. Not me, I must say, but other people were getting a bit fed up that his promos were a bit rambling, without ever going anywhere. And that's that. And he's going to kill those personas bit by bit until he becomes the word of the day, sociopath. But
that's really interesting.
It is, isn't it? It's a really it's a much more detailed take than what I thought of, and I was fascinated, talking to Warren about it, because there was me just like, three people, that's a stable.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'll be the same. The thing is, though,
it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But do we trust WWE to be that clever? Because that's really clever storytelling. Do we trust WWE to be as clever as Warren about storytelling? I'd love to see it, actually. Now you said it. That's really cool. That's got a lot of possibilities, and I like that idea.
Yeah.
But I'm inclined to kind of agree with you. I think it will be a stable of some sort.
Yeah, and I think what hurt Bray over the last couple of years is sort of three things. One was he was a cult leader without a cult.
Yeah.
Which, that automatically makes him redundant, because you're like, if you're a cult leader who's trying to influence people and manipulate people, but you've got no cult, kind of takes away from the character straight away. His master plans always backfired and didn't work. Whether like his big master plans, if you think the one with Daniel Bryan ended up tricking him. They kidnapped Kane and Undertaker. They came back the next week and destroyed all four of them. Randy Orton burned down the compound and took his belt with. So every time he tried to have this big overarching master plan, it never came off. So whilst he seems really clever and manipulative and a really cerebral heel, ultimately he just looked like a failure from that point of view as well. And then the other one is that he kept losing the big matches, which I think they've done something similar with Samoa Joe. Is they built Samoa Joe up every time to be this killing machine, really good, great, what a gimmick, what a promo, everyone's behind like the character, and then he'd have a big match and lose it, and he did it about 4 times last year, and it just kills off any momentum.
He just became a Scooby-Doo villain, didn't he, in the end?
Yeah, and I think when he starts a feud now, whichever direction they decide to take it, and there's many more directions than the couple which we've just talked about. They need to make sure that if he's a heel and he's got a master plan, it needs to work.
Yeah.
Certainly for the mid-term, even if in the long term the babyface overcomes them, depending on what it is. But you've got to win.
Yeah, absolutely.
I say this all the time. Wins matter. People will invest in people who win emotionally.
I think wins matter, especially when you're trying to set somebody up as a heel, because you can get away for a certain amount of time with the babyface on the back foot. But if you're setting up a heel, your heel has to be competent, because otherwise your heel's not a threat, right? Like, as you point out, Bray Wyatt is this great, mastermind, a cult leader, but he doesn't have any followings and none of his plans actually work. Then he's a Scooby-Doo villain. He's not a great heel. You need your heel to have a degree of dominance, and also because then it's the chase, isn't it? That's one of the classic wrestling storylines, is the chase. You've got the heel who's winning, albeit maybe dirty tactics, but they're getting the wins. They're triumphing. And you really want to see them crush, because you should. There's less, I know that we're in an era of grey areas and grey characters, but I still think there's a lot of room for your good old classic good vanquishes evil story, and I do think that you can tell that story in a sophisticated way. I think one of my chief complaints about WWE is they don't know how to write a babyface. They just don't. I'm still mad that as much as Sammy is great fun as a heel, you had a Ricky Steamboat, you had a career babyface there, and they didn't know how to write him. Bailey is Bailey's a stellar example of that. How do you screw Bailey up? I don't understand. You've got a career babyface. You've got how do you get that wrong? And I worry the same is going to be the same with Mustafa Ali, who, is got amazing babyface fire. They're gonna get him wrong. I think I don't know what it is about them, and it's not always been that way. I remember when they could write compelling babyface story. Like even Daniel Bryan, for God's sake, that wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I do think they fell into that a little bit. Are you okay to stay for a few minutes? Or
yeah, I can stay a while, no problem.
Cool. So in going into what you said there about they not being able to write baby faces, the Usos are one of the most over babyface acts in the company.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Obviously not quite at the Kofi Kingston level, but they're more over than most of the baby faces.
Yeah.
The last 2 weeks, they've gone into the revivals, and that's those vignettes and those promos. They've not made me want to support the Usos and laugh at the revival.
No, it's
They've
just
made
painful.
me think the Usos are dicks.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's like that's almost like it's like Vince's jock mentality.
Yeah.
He can't hide it, can he?
It's isn't it? Would be really funny if we did this ridiculous thing. I think what I hate about it the most, and there's a lot to hate about it, is it's so transparently punishing the revival for daring to sort of, want more for themselves. Yeah, and it's like, how unprofessional is that to punish your wrestlers on screen in such a flagrant way? I mean, what are you trying to make an example of them? It's unethical, it's childish, and more to the point, it's not entertaining or funny. It's just stupid. It's and as you rightly point out, it's basically it's kind of ruined the Usos because the Usos are better than that.
Yeah, they just, like I say, seem like dicks, to be honest. And it's not their fault. It's just the way they're being portrayed.
You can only do what you've got to work with. I remember last year when Sami Zayn did the Bobby Lashley sisters thing, and it was one of the grossest things I've seen on television. I just thought, it had Vince all. I think you've got a real issue with the product when you can smell Vince McMahon. When you can see his fingerprints visibly on everything.
Well, this is the problem when you've got a 74-year-old. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be involved, because obviously he's built the WWE to where they are. So he's obviously got a good mind for business and wrestling promotion.
Yeah.
But
keep him out of creative.
He overrules everyone else's ideas.
Yeah.
He doesn't listen to anyone else. So anyone, how many good creative minds have they got in that company, whether it's like what Triple H is doing with NXT, or the wrestlers themselves, or people like Abyss and Jeff Jarrett, and the names it's an endless list of creative minds, and not one of them is in a position where they can say, no, this is what we need to do. Even Triple H, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's not a problem if that one person turns everything to gold every time.
Yeah.
Then, let's listen to that person. But he is dry. The only fans left watching that TV program at the moment are the hardcore fans.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bit of a myth about like trying to attract casual fans, because I don't think there's any such thing in this day and age because of the internet.
Yeah.
If you like wrestling, you read wrestling sites.
Yeah, and there's so much more wrestling out there as well for you. That's what's great about the internet right now, is if I want to watch women's wrestling, there's promotions that will do that better than WWE will do that. If I want to see good long-term storyline, I can go to NJPW. WWE isn't the only company anymore. It's frustrating, and I think you pointed out in here as well, and that NXT gets it right. So obviously it's not a problem, in my opinion, it's not a problem with the talent. It's what is NXT getting so right that the main roster can't replicate? Is it a matter of pride that Vince McMahon isn't, because it's NXT's formula for the most part. There's a couple of misses, but for the most part, NXT gets it right. It builds characters successfully. It builds stories successfully. You want to see what happens. You want to root for Aleister Black. You want to root for Ricochet. You want to root, or you can go back further than that. They've got it right consistently for a long time. I don't understand why the main roster doesn't look at that formula and go, "Hey, they've cracked it." I know there's going to be difficulties transporting it to a bigger stage and to a bigger audience, but there's a lot of lessons they could learn from NXT that they just don't. They seem resistant to.
If you think NXT does all that with a shorter show each week, it does. It's once a week, an hour.
Mm-hmm.
It's the takeovers are, they're shorter than the other. They're not as often as the other shows. So, I think a big part of it is they tell their stories logically. They build their characters. Even the characters. Not every character's on every week. Not every character is on a takeover.
Yeah.
And the ones who are not on takeover, they're being built up either with squash matches or just a little undercurrent feud, which is on TV and on YouTube and on Twitter, and it's being built up. And then before you know it, there's a big rivalry, which is on the undercard. But it's long-term storytelling, which they seem to completely have abandoned on the main roster. And you can only look at one person, unfortunately. What's the difference? Mm-hmm. The only difference is one man, which is what it is, I suppose. Going back quickly to the Revival, I wanted to say, can you imagine if the WWE told the Revival, we're not renewing your contracts, so your contracts are up, say, at the end of June, but we want you to work, and can you imagine they went out and started messing about on TV or not doing their job properly? Not taking it seriously or whatever it may be, they would be slated by the company and they'd be unprofessional and this and that. There's no difference. At the end of the day, if they're putting them on TV, they should be professional.
Absolutely.
Imagine what frustrates me the most, and really, I've got to be honest, pisses me off, is the Usos versus the Revival could be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
They just had a good tag team feud and then had a pay-per-view match, give them 20 minutes, and they will probably have the match of the night.
Yeah, just strip all the bullshit out. You don't need this ridiculous story. But you're right. I think I got angry about this the other week on the Fightful podcast. But Sasha Banks is the perfect example of how WWE play it when doesn't play by their rules. Sasha Banks has said no. From what we know, Sasha Banks has said no. She's had enough. Can't blame her for it. She's in every bit as much in the right as the Revival are, as Luke Harper is, and yet the vilification of Sasha Banks just for saying no, thank you, I've had enough. She's totally in the right to say that, and the treatment of the Revival is the perfect justification for the way Sasha Banks is acting, because if WWE is so petty and so unprofessional as to publicly punish their talent for daring to say I want better, then why should Sasha Banks play ball? Why should any of them play ball if that's the way it's going to be? They should take their chances, because they're not going to get treated any worse by walking away. I mean, do a Neville, sit out for a year. What's the worst that can happen? He should not be humiliated on TV.
When was the last time you saw ROH, New Japan, Impact, any wrestling company humiliate their performers because they refused to sign a contract or because they did, something?
Well, look at Kushida, right? Kushida was
heroes.
Yeah, exactly,
heroes,
and rightly so. And he left because he wanted more than NJPW could give him, and NJPW went, okay, fair enough. You've been great for us. We respect you. We wish you the best.
And they knew he was going to WWE.
Yeah,
one of their biggest gave him a big send off.
Absolutely. The gulf in the way that people are treated is massive, and it's shocking. It's locker room shit. It's childish. It's You know, and it also makes you less inclined to support the company because the other thing, you know, that you alluded to earlier as well is what the fans want. You know, the fans have been behind the revival. You know, the fans were excited when the revival won the title, so it was sensible for WWE to do something. The Usos are massively popular. Do something sensible. Put on a good show with them. If you're going to have the rivalry, like you said, put on amazing matches. They're both capable of it. Why take it down to this level? It doesn't benefit anybody except for Vince McMahon.
Yeah, I could talk about it for hours.
So could I. Sorry, I get angry about this.
No, it's frustrating because
Yeah.
Revival is one of my favorite acts in all of wrestling, and I feel like WWE could do tag team wrestling really well because I've seen them do it on NXT. I've seen the tag team wrestling steal the show, take over after takeover after takeover.
Absolutely.
But yet, for some reason, Vince McMahon doesn't fancy tag team wrestling as a draw, so he just doesn't do anything with it. Which is weird,
because now I remember when I was a big WWE fan when I was younger. And do you remember when one of the hottest things WWE
versus the Hart Foundation?
Yeah. And then even later than that, when Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys had epic rivalries, you know, it was so compelling. It was so exciting. You wanted to watch it. It was... tag team wrestling has always been fun to watch when they do it right. So it's not tag team wrestling that's the problem.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't understand it at all. So just a quick couple of questions before we finish off. Obviously, we just spoke about Sasha a little bit. So very quickly, Sasha Banks, staying or going?
I hope she goes. I really hope she goes. She deserves better.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think she will. I think she's got to the point now where she's thinking, sod it.
Yeah, they've made promises. Yeah, I agree with you.
She's friends with the Revival as well, and I just think that she's looked at them, seen how they're being treated, and why would she want to come back after that?
Imagine
this is what you've done to my friends.
Absolutely.
They refused to sign a contract.
Imagine the kind of program she could have at AEW. Imagine if she signed with AEW and they put her in a properly written, properly managed program. She would kill it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the only thing which might keep her there is Triple H. Obviously, Triple H is close to the four horsewomen from NXT, and I think if he steps in, he could be the difference between them staying and going ultimately. Okay, so Jon Moxley, will he get hot and end up back in WWE, or will he go to AEW or New Japan?
It's really hard to say. I don't think he will go back to WWE, though. I think the way they've handled this has been very different. It seems very authentic and very legit. I think he's going elsewhere.
So it's a weird one. I think that the way they gave him the send-off and the way they did it so publicly and on TV and had a show about it on the network, to me, that says that they think that they don't think he's going to AEW or New Japan.
Interesting.
I just don't think that they would give him that send-off if they think he's going to AEW.
That's fair.
I could be really wrong.
So you think maybe they think he's going somewhere else, but he's not going to when they're great rivals? Yeah.
Yeah, I just think they might think it, but doesn't mean it'll happen.
Yeah.
If AEW turn up and say, look, we'll give you whatever, $2 million a year, but you've only got to wrestle 4 times a year.
Bonus, isn't it? Well, considering as well,
on the road,
he was one of the hardest workers for WWE several years in a row. You know, so it'll be I think he's earned a bit of a rest now.
Yeah, and I think people don't understand how brutal their schedule is. He did a show last night in Northern Ireland, and if you think it was Wednesday yesterday, and obviously in the UK where we are, it was Wednesday yesterday. They did a show in Northern Ireland, but they did a show Tuesday night in the SmackDown show, which obviously in the UK finishes like 4 a.m.
Wow.
So they flow like 4 or 5 a.m. to Northern Ireland. I don't know how long's a flight from like general flight from America to
East Coast,
the UK.
about 8 hours.
Right. So you're talking, say, 6 o'clock in the morning UK time. At the earliest, they'd have been on a flight.
Yeah.
That would probably be the quickest flight they could have got.
Wow.
8 hours. Do you know what I mean?
It's
They're
grueling, isn't it? It's
a couple
just,
of hours, and then they're back in the ring.
and they wonder why their talent wears out and why they get accumulate injuries. You know, it's
bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, last couple. How long till the crowd turns on Roman Reigns again, if at all?
Oh, you know what? I've always said I actually quite like Roman Reigns. I think the crowd, I understand why the crowd react the way they do. It isn't Roman Reigns' fault, but I mean, the dude, he's a legit cancer survivor. He's always worked his arse off. He's always turned up. He's always, he's not a part-timer. I want to believe the crowd won't turn on him. I worry they will, and I don't think it will take that long. I think the package they showed, was it last week or this week? I think it was this week, wasn't it? Yeah. They showed the video package of Isn't Roman Reigns Wonderful, basically.
Yeah.
And I feel like if they keep that up, it's,
won't be long.
Yeah, they'll turn quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Vince won't be able to help himself.
Yeah.
That he'll want to get him the belt on him, and he'll want to get him at the top of the card. And he's going to want him beating everyone, and I think that's where the problem's going to come.
And the problem is they've got the perfect opportunity to tell a really good story with Roman Reigns now, They've got the golden opportunity to rehabilitate his character, to tell the story that they always should have told with him. And they won't take it.
No, of course they won't. Vince, what I'd like to say, Vince will not be able to help himself when it comes to Roman Reigns. He will have him at the top of the card, he'll have him beating everyone, overcoming the odds, playing the... Sorry. He'll be playing the underdog, even though he's like a Grand Slam champion.
Yeah.
Handsome, 6'4", built like whatever, and they try to portray him as an underdog, and it's like the fans are never going to buy that. Especially when they know that he's Vince's pick for face of the company, away from the TV show. So it's very difficult then to try and portray him as like Vince is holding him back. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a difficult sell.
Yeah, yeah.
So, right. Thank you very much for coming on, Laura. I really appreciate it. All you guys can find, you can visit Laura's website, which is www.lauramauro.com. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And on Twitter, what was your Twitter again?
My Twitter is at Laura N for November Mauro.
There you go. And you can find me on at ACEcast_Nation to keep up to date on upcoming shows and guests. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube and Ace Podcast Nation. If you want to suggest shows or questions for guests, you can send them into Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube, please. We picked up 500 followers on Facebook over the last 4 days, which is very nice. So welcome to everyone. Please subscribe to YouTube as well. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Laura, again. And we'll see you all next time.